The vastness of space stretched endlessly before the crew of the Eos, humanity's first interstellar colony ship. After months of traveling through the cold, silent void, they had finally reached their destination, an uncharted planet in the Seur Andromeda Quadrant. From orbit, the world looked like a jewel floating in the darkness, its surface shimmering with strange, crystalline formations that caught the light of its distant sun. It was beautiful, alien, and completely unknown. Captain Elias Voss stood at the helm of the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the data streaming across holographic displays. A seasoned leader, he carried himself with quiet authority but also bore the weight of responsibility for the lives aboard the Eos. Beside him, Dr. Lyra Kale leaned forward eagerly, her fingers dancing over her tablet as she analyzed preliminary scans of the planet below. Her excitement was palpable. This was what she lived for, discovering new worlds and unraveling their mysteries. "Looks promising," Elias said, breaking the silence. "No signs of hostile activity or atmospheric hazards. Let's gear up and send down a recon team." Zane Rourke, the ship's head of security, snorted from where he leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a perpetual scowl etched onto his face. His reputation for being reckless often clashed with the captain's cautious nature, but no one could deny his skill in combat. "Hostile? You mean other than whatever made those crystal things?" he muttered sarcastically. "Still, better safe than sorry." Ignoring Zane's comment, Elias turned to address the rest of the team. "Dr. Kale, you're leading the science division. Rourke, you'll handle security. We stick together, stay alert, and avoid taking unnecessary risks. Understood?" Everyone nodded, though Zane rolled his eyes when Elias emphasized caution. To him, rules were meant to be bent, or outright broken, if the situation called for it. The drop pod descended smoothly through the atmosphere, buffeted only slightly by turbulence. When the hatch opened, the team stepped out into a surreal landscape. Towering crystalline structures jutted out of the ground like jagged teeth, glowing faintly with an inner light that pulsed rhythmically. The air smelled metallic, tinged with something sharp and unfamiliar. Strange plants swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves iridescent and almost translucent. "This is incredible," Lyra breathed, already crouching to examine the nearest formation. She ran her gloved hand over its smooth surface, marveling at how warm it felt despite the chilly air. "These crystals, they're not natural. Someone, or something, built them. Or grew them," Zane added dryly, scanning the horizon, with his rifle at the ready. "Either way, I don't trust it. Feels too quiet." Elias agreed. "Stay focused. Stick close and let's gather samples. If we find anything unusual, we report back immediately." For the next hour, the team worked efficiently, collecting fragments of the crystals and documenting the surrounding flora. Everything seemed peaceful, until Zane spotted movement out of the corner of his eye. "There," he barked, raising his weapon and pointing toward a cluster of rocks nearby. Something sleek and metallic darted behind them, moving faster than anything human. The shape disappeared almost instantly, leaving only a faint blur in its wake. "What was that?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Don't know, but it's not staying still long enough to ask nicely," Zane replied, stalking forward. He motioned for the others to follow, keeping his rifle trained on the area. As they approached, the creature reappeared briefly, revealing itself fully for the first time. It was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Its body was streamlined, covered in overlapping plates that shifted between organic skin and reflective metal. Multiple limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, and its elongated head housed large, multifaceted eyes that glinted menacingly. Most unsettling of all was the faint hum emanating from it, a sound that vibrated through the ground beneath their feet. "It's intelligent," Lyra whispered, stepping forward despite Zane's warning glare. "Look at the symmetry of its design. This isn't just some random predator." "Yeah, well, intelligence doesn't mean friendly," Zane snapped. Without waiting for orders, he fired a warning shot near the creature's feet, hoping to scare it off. Instead, the bullet grazed one of its legs, drawing a spray of silvery fluid. The effect was immediate. The creature let out a piercing shriek that echoed across the landscape, sending shivers down everyone's spines. Then, just as suddenly, it vanished into thin air, or so it seemed. The ground trembled slightly as if responding to the scream, and a low-frequency pulse rippled outward, causing the crystals around them to glow brighter. "What did you do?" Lyra shouted, panic rising in her voice. "That wasn't a warning shot, it was an attack. I didn't see you coming up with any brilliant ideas." Zane shot back, reloading his rifle. "Besides, it's fine. Whatever it is, it ran away." But it hadn't. Moments later, the team realized the truth. The creature hadn't fled. It had called for backup. Scanners began picking up multiple signals converging on their position, moving at impossible speeds. Whatever these creatures were, they weren't alone. "Fall back to the pod," Elias ordered, his voice tight with urgency. "Now!" As they sprinted back toward the drop site, the ground erupted around them. Dozens of the same creatures emerged from the shadows, their movements synchronized and eerily precise. Each one radiated hostility, and their glowing eyes locked onto the intruders with predatory intent. "We've got company," Zane yelled, firing wildly as the creatures closed in. Their weapons barely slowed them down, the bullets ricocheting harmlessly off their armored hides. One leaped directly at Lyra, knocking her to the ground, but Zane tackled it mid-air, grappling furiously until another blast forced it to retreat. By the time they reached the pod, the creatures were everywhere, circling like wolves preparing for the kill. The team scrambled inside, slamming the hatch shut just as clawed hands slammed against the hull. Breathing heavily, they stared at each other in stunned silence. "Well," Zane said after a moment, breaking the tension with forced nonchalance, "that could have gone better." Lyra glared at him, her fear giving way to anger. "You just declared war on an entire species, Zane. Congratulations." Outside, the creatures continued to watch, their glowing eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. Unbeknownst to the humans, the signal triggered by Zane's shot had reached far beyond the planet. Across the galaxy, ancient beings stirred, awakened by the call of their kin. Humanity had no idea what it had unleashed, but soon it would learn the hard way. The drop pod shot back into orbit, shaking violently as it broke free of the planet's atmosphere. Inside, the team sat in tense silence, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Lyra clutched her tablet tightly, replaying the events on the surface in her mind. Zane leaned against the wall, his rifle resting across his lap, a smug grin tugging at the corner of his mouth despite the chaos they'd narrowly escaped. Elias, seated near the cockpit, stared out the viewport at the glowing blue-green orb below, his jaw clenched. "Well," Zane said finally, breaking the quiet. "That was fun." "Fun?" Lyra snapped, turning to glare at him. Her voice trembled with anger and fear. "You fired at something we didn't understand, provoked an entire species and nearly got us killed. That wasn't fun, it was reckless." Zane shrugged, unfazed by her outburst. "Hey, I didn't see you coming up with a better plan. Besides, we're alive, aren't we? Mission accomplished." Elias held up a hand before Lyra could respond. "Enough. We don't have time for this. Whatever those things are, they're organized and dangerous. When we get back to the EOS, we'll assess the situation and figure out our next move." Back aboard the colony ship, the crew convened in the main command center. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing real-time data from the planet's surface and surrounding space. The mood was grim. Everyone knew the mission had gone sideways, but no one expected what came next. "Captain," called Lieutenant Mara Solis, the ship's communications officer, her voice tinged with alarm. "We're picking up multiple contacts emerging from deep space. They're heading straight for us." "Multiple contacts?" Elias asked, stepping closer to the display. Sure enough, dozens of blips appeared on the long-range scanners, moving at incredible speed. Within minutes, the first of the alien ships came into view, sleek, angular vessels that looked more like living organisms than machines. Their surfaces shimmered with the same crystalline material found on the planet below. "They're here," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's systems. She watched as the ships surrounded the EOS, cutting off any chance of escape. They followed us before anyone could react. The alien fleet opened fire. Beams of energy lanced through space, striking the Eos with devastating precision. Alarms blared as the ship shuddered under the assault. Lights flickered, and consoles sparked as critical systems failed one by one. "This isn't just an attack," Jax Corvus shouted from his station. The ship's chief engineer was frantically trying to stabilize the engines. "They're targeting our communication arrays and propulsion systems. If we can't get them back online, we're sitting ducks." Zane sprang into action, barking, orders to the security team stationed throughout the ship. "Lock down all decks, arm yourselves, we've got company incoming." He turned to Elias. "Permission to take point, sir?" "Granted," Elias replied without hesitation. "Hold them off as long as you can. We need time to repair the damage." As if on cue, the hull breach alarms screamed. The Vryn had boarded the ship. The corridors of the Eos became a battlefield. Zane led a small squad of armed personnel, engaging the invaders in brutal close-quarters combat. The Vryn moved with terrifying speed and coordination, their biomechanical bodies adapting to every tactic the humans threw at them. Bullets ricocheted harmlessly off their armored hides, forcing the defenders to rely on sheer determination and improvisation. "They're too fast," one of the crew members yelled, firing wildly as a Vryn warrior leaped onto the ceiling, its claws digging into the metal panels. It dropped down behind the group, slashing with deadly accuracy before disappearing into the shadows again. "Focus your fire," Zane commanded, aiming carefully and unloading a burst into the creature's exposed joints. This time it staggered, emitting a high-pitched screech before collapsing. "Aim for the weak points. They're not invincible." Despite their efforts, the Vryn overwhelmed them step by step. One by one, the defenders fell, leaving Zane and his remaining teammates isolated and outnumbered. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, reinforcements arrived, led by none other than Captain Voss himself. "We can't hold them forever," Elias said grimly, taking cover beside Zane. "How's the engineering team doing?" "They're working on it," Zane replied, reloading his rifle. "But if we don't buy them more time, we're done for." Meanwhile, deep within the bowels of the ship, Jax and his engineers worked feverishly to restore power to the engines. Sparks flew as they bypassed damaged circuits and rerouted energy flows. Tessa Nori, the linguist who had been studying the Vryn's signals, joined them unexpectedly. "I might be able to help," she said, holding up a portable scanner. "I've decoded fragments of their language. It's based on patterns and frequencies. If I can sync our systems with theirs, maybe we can disrupt their coordination." Jax raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Worth a shot. Do it." Tessa connected her device to the main console, initiating a sequence designed to broadcast interference across the ship. Moments later, the Vryn attacks faltered slightly. Their movements became less fluid, giving the human defenders a much-needed edge. But the respite was short-lived. As the battle raged on, another crisis unfolded. The Vryn managed to breach the science lab where Lyra had been analyzing the crystal samples. Overwhelmed by superior numbers, she was captured and dragged away toward the enemy ships. "No!" Zane shouted when he received the news via comms. "We have to go after her." "We can't," Elias countered firmly. "If we split our forces now, we'll lose everything. Our priority is getting the ship operational and escaping." Zane clenched his fists, torn between duty and loyalty. In the end, he reluctantly obeyed orders, though guilt gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the image of Lyra being taken. Her terrified expression burned into his memory. Finally, after what felt like hours, Jax's team succeeded in restoring partial engine functionality. "We've got thrust," he announced triumphantly. "Not enough for full warp, but enough to break free of their blockade." Elias wasted no time. "All hands, prepare for emergency departure. Fire everything we've got left to clear a path." The Eos lurched forward, its remaining weapons blazing as it punched through the encircling Vryn fleet. Explosions lit up the void as the alien ships scrambled to give chase. For a moment, it seemed like the humans might actually escape. But then a massive blast rocked the ship, sending everyone sprawling. "What was that?" Jax demanded, scrambling back to his station. "One of their ships self-destructed," Mara reported, her face pale. They rammed us. The impact had crippled the Eos further, but it also created an opening. With their pursuers momentarily disoriented, Elias gave the order to jump to sublight speed. The ship groaned in protest but obeyed, limping away from the planet as the Vryn fleet faded into the distance. When the immediate danger passed, the crew gathered in the command center once more. Exhaustion hung heavy in the air, along with a sense of profound loss. They were battered, bruised, and missing one of their own. Lyra was gone. She knew something. Tessa said softly, breaking the silence. Those crystals, they weren't just random. There's a reason the Vryn guard them so fiercely. And now they've got her, Zane muttered, his voice thick with regret. This is my fault. Elias placed a hand on his shoulder. Blame won't change anything. What matters now is survival, and figuring out how to deal with what we've unleashed. Because deep down everyone knew this wasn't over. The Vryn weren't just predators. They were guardians of something far greater, and far deadlier. And humanity had made a powerful enemy. The Eos drifted through space like a wounded bird, its battered hull groaning under the strain of makeshift repairs. The crew moved quietly through the dimly lit corridors, their faces etched with exhaustion and grief. Lyra's absence weighed heavily on everyone, but for Zane it was a constant ache. Her capture wasn't just a failure, it was personal. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her terrified face as the Vryn dragged her away. Captain Elias called an emergency meeting. In the command center, holographic displays flickered weakly, showing maps of the planet they'd fled and fragmented data recovered from Lyra's research before her abduction. The mood was somber, but determination simmered beneath the surface. We can't leave her, Zane said firmly, breaking the silence. She knows too much, and if the Vryn are using her to access that knowledge, who knows what they'll do next. Elias rubbed his temples, clearly torn. We're barely holding this ship together. Going back is suicide. Not if we hit them where it hurts, Zane countered, leaning forward. They're Hive. If we sneak in, rescue Lyra, and sabotage whatever tech they're guarding, we might stand a chance. Tessa Nori, the linguist, nodded slowly. He's right. From what I've decoded, the Vryn operate like a single organism. Their queen controls everything. If we take her out, the entire system collapses. Jax Corvus, the engineer, raised an eyebrow. Assuming we survive long enough to find her. Those creatures adapt faster than anything I've ever seen. It's risky, Elias admitted, pacing the room. But staying here isn't an option either. If the Vryn decide to hunt us down, we won't last another day. All right, here's the plan. Zane, you lead a small team, just enough to stay stealthy. Tessa, you're coming to help decode signals and navigate the Hive. Jax, stay on board and keep this ship running. We leave at dawn. The drop pod descended silently toward the planet, cloaked in darkness. Inside, Zane, Tessa, and two other volunteers, Corporal Mia Torres, a sharpshooter, and Ensign Rin Cole, a medic, prepared for the mission ahead. Each carried minimal gear to reduce noise and weight, relying on improvised tools rather than bulky equipment. As they landed, the air felt heavier than before, charged with an electric tension. The crystalline structures glowed faintly, casting eerie shadows across the landscape. The team moved cautiously, sticking to the edges of the jungle to avoid detection. Every step crunched softly against the metallic ground, and every sound seemed amplified in the oppressive silence. This way, Tessa whispered, consulting her scanner. The Hive entrance should be close. The biosignals are strongest over there. They reached a massive crater ringed by towering spires of crystal. At its center loomed a cavernous opening, pulsating with faint blue light. The air shimmered, unnaturally around it, as though reality itself bent near the threshold. Looks inviting, Zane muttered sarcastically, gripping his rifle tighter. Let's go. Inside, the Hive was a labyrinth of twisting tunnels and organic walls that pulsed rhythmically, almost like a living creature breathing. Strange fluids dripped from the ceiling, sizzling faintly when they hit the floor. The eye temperature rose steadily the deeper they went, forcing the team to shed layers of clothing. They're watching us, Mia murmured, scanning the shadows nervously. I can feel it. They're not attacking yet, Tessa replied, adjusting her scanner. That means they don't see us as a threat, or they're luring us deeper. As if on cue, the walls began to shift. Panels slid open, revealing rows of dormant Vryn warriors suspended in gelatinous pods. Their multifaceted eyes twitched, slightly as though sensing intruders nearby. Keep moving, Zane ordered, his voice low but firm. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary. The deeper they ventured, the more unsettling the environment became. Strange symbols etched into the walls emitted soft hums, resonating with Tessa's scanner. She paused occasionally to analyze, them piecing together fragments of information about the Vryn's purpose. They're not just predators, she explained in hushed tones. They're guardians of something ancient. These symbols reference a great rebirth. Whatever it is, it's tied to the core of the hive. Finally, they reached a massive chamber dominated by a colossal structure at its center. It resembled a fusion reactor, but instead of mechanical components, it was made entirely of crystalline material. Streams of energy coursed through veins, embedded in its surface, creating dazzling patterns of light. That's it, Tessa said, awestruck. The source of their power, the device they're protecting. Before anyone could respond, a familiar figure stepped into view. It was Lyra, or at least what remained of her. Her eyes glowed faintly, and her movements were unnervingly precise as though controlled by an external force. Behind her stood several Vryn warriors, their claws gleaming menacingly. Lyra, Zane called out, lowering his weapon instinctively. It's me, Zane. Her lips parted, but the voice that emerged was distorted, layered with echoes. You have trespassed. You have awakened what must remain dormant. She's partially assimilated, Tessa whispered urgently. The hive mind has integrated her into its network. Zane hesitated, torn between rescuing her and completing the mission. Lyra, fight it. You're stronger than this. For a moment, her expression softened, and the glow in her eyes dimmed. Zane, run, she managed to choke out before the hive mind reasserted control, snapping her head up sharply. The Vryn warriors lunged forward, closing in on the team. Fall back, Zane shouted, firing bursts to slow their advance. Mia, cover us! Rin, get ready to patch up anyone who gets hurt. The team retreated deeper into the hive, pursued relentlessly by the Vryn. Despite the chaos, Tessa continued analyzing the device, piecing together its function. It's a terraforming engine, she announced grimly. If activated, it will rewrite the molecular structure of entire planets, but it could destabilize ecosystems beyond repair. Billions would die. And if we destroy it, Zane asked, panting as he ducked behind a pillar. The backlash could collapse the hive, Tessa replied. But we'd need to overload it manually, and someone would have to stay behind to ensure it works. I'll do it. Jax's voice crackled over the comms. Back aboard the EOS, he had been monitoring their progress. Just give me the signal and I'll remote trigger the overload sequence. No, Zane growled. I started this mess. I'm finishing it. Once we save Lyra, I'll handle the detonation. The argument ended abruptly as the team stumbled into a new chamber, the throne room of the Vryn Queen. Larger than any of the others, she loomed atop a crystalline dais, her body radiating raw power. Her multifaceted eyes locked onto the intruders, and a deafening roar filled the chamber. Here we go, Zane muttered, raising his weapon. Everyone ready? With no time to waste, the final battle began. The chamber erupted into chaos as the Vryn Queen let out another ear-splitting roar. The sound reverberated through the hive, shaking the very walls and sending shockwaves rippling across the crystalline floor. Zane and his team barely had time to brace themselves before the Queen's warriors surged forward, their claws gleaming with deadly intent. Stay sharp, Zane barked, firing a burst at the nearest Vryn warrior. His shot struck true, hitting one of the creature's joints, and causing it to stagger, but only for a moment. The Vryn adapted almost instantly, their biomechanical bodies reinforcing the damaged area with hardened plates. Adaptation confirmed, Tessa shouted over the din, consulting her scanner. They're learning from every attack. We need to keep changing tactics. Mia Torres, the sharpshooter, took cover behind a jagged crystal spire and began picking off the advancing warriors with precise headshots. Each kill bought them precious seconds, but reinforcements poured in relentlessly from the tunnels behind them. Ensign Rin Cole crouched near the edge of the fray, tending to a gash on Mia's arm while keeping an eye out for threats. "We can't keep this up forever," she yelled, panic creeping into her voice. "There's too many." Zane gritted his teeth, his mind racing. They needed to take down the Queen, but getting close enough to do real damage seemed impossible. Every step forward was met with overwhelming resistance, forcing them to retreat or risk being overwhelmed. Lyra's warning amid the chaos. Lyra suddenly stepped into view again, flanked by two towering Vryn guards. Her glowing eyes locked onto Zane, and her distorted voice echoed through the chamber. "You cannot win, the Hive will endure." Her words were chilling, but Zane refused to back down. "Lyra, I know you're still in there. Fight them. Help us stop this." For a brief moment, her expression softened, and the glow in her eyes dimmed. She whispered something faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Core. Overload. Queen." Then, just as quickly, the hive mind reasserted control, snapping her back into line. The Vryn warriors tightened their grip on her arms, dragging her away from the battle. "She gave us a clue," Tessa said urgently, her fingers flying over her scanner. "If we overload the terraforming device near the Queen's core, it'll destabilize the entire hive." "But how do we get close enough?" Mia demanded, narrowly dodging a swipe from a Vryn claw. Zane's eyes narrowed as he formulated a plan. "We split up. Tessa, you and Rin find a way to rig the device for overload. Mia and I will draw their attention and keep them busy." "No way," Mia protested. "You'll get yourself killed." "It's the only shot we've got," Zane shot back, reloading his rifle. "Now move. Divide and conquer Tessa," and Rin slipped away during a lull in the fighting, using the shadows cast by the pulsating crystals to stay hidden. Meanwhile, Zane and Mia launched a coordinated assault on the Queen's guards, drawing fire and creating enough noise to mask their teammates' escape. Zane hurled a smoke grenade into the fray, filling the chamber with thick, choking clouds. The Vryn hesitated momentarily, their enhanced senses struggling to penetrate the haze. Seizing the opportunity, Zane charged straight for the Queen, firing wildly to keep her distracted. "You want me? Come and get me," he taunted, dodging a swipe from one of her massive claws. The Queen roared furiously, her multifaceted eyes locking onto him with predatory focus. She lunged forward, smashing through crystal spires and sending shards flying in all directions. Mia covered him from a distance, picking off any Vryn warriors that tried to flank him. "Hurry up, Zane," she yelled, reloading her rifle. "I can't hold them off forever." Sabotaging the core. Meanwhile, Tessa and Rin reached the heart of the chamber, where the terraforming device pulsed ominously beside the Queen's dais. Tessa immediately set to work, connecting her portable scanner to the device's interface. Lines of alien code scrolled across her screen as she worked frantically to override its systems. "We need more power to trigger the overload," Tessa muttered, glancing around for a solution. Her eyes landed on a nearby conduit feeding energy directly into the device. "Rin, help me reroute this channel. It'll amplify the feedback loop." Rin nodded, pulling out a toolkit and prying open the conduit panel. Sparks flew as they worked together, their hands moving quickly despite the tension mounting around them. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew louder as Zane and Mia fought desperately to buy them time. "How long?" Rin asked, sweat dripping down her face. "Almost there," Tessa replied, her voice trembling with urgency. "Just a few more seconds." Suddenly, a Vryn warrior emerged from the shadows, its claws raised high. Before it could strike, Rin grabbed a shard of broken crystal and hurled it like a dagger, impaling the creature's chest. It screeched and collapsed, giving them a few more precious moments. "Done!" Tessa exclaimed, stepping back as the device began to hum violently. A countdown appeared on her scanner. 60 seconds until detonation. "We need to warn the others," Rin shouted, grabbing Tessa's arm and pulling her toward. "In the main chambers, the enemy were surrounded." Dozens of Vryn warriors closed in, their claws poised to strike. Zane glanced at Mia, who gave him a grim nod. They both knew they weren't walking out of this alive. At that moment, Tessa's voice crackled over the comms. Overload initiated. Get out of there now. Zane smirked, raising his rifle one last time. Guess we made our point. He turned to Mia. Go, I'll hold them off. No way in hell, Mia snapped, standing firm beside him. If we're going down, we're doing it together. The Queen let out a final deafening roar, lunging toward them with terrifying speed. Just as her claws descended, a blinding explosion erupted from the terraforming device, engulfing the chamber in searing light and heat. Aftermath. When the dust settled, the hive lay in ruins. The once majestic crystalline structures were reduced to smoldering rubble, and the Vryn warriors lay motionless, their hive minds severed. In the wreckage, Zane stirred groggily, his body battered but alive. Beside him, Mia coughed weakly, clutching her side. Did we? Zane croaked, struggling to sit up. We did, Mia replied, managing a faint smile. But where's Tessa and Rin? Before he could answer, the sound of footsteps approached. Tessa and Rin emerged from the shadows, bruised but intact. We couldn't leave without you, Tessa said, helping Zane to his feet. As they regrouped, they spotted movement nearby. It was Lyra crawling weakly from the debris. Her eyes no longer glowed and her movements were shaky but human. Zane rushed to her side, lifting her gently. You're free, he whispered, relief washing over him. She smiled faintly, her voice hoarse. Thanks. To you. With their mission complete, the survivors made their way back to the surface, leaving the shattered remains of the hive behind. But as they departed, a faint transmission echoed through space, a chilling reminder that not all threats had been eliminated. You have awakened us. Prepare. The battered drop pod ascended through the planet's atmosphere, its hull scorched and dented from the chaos below. Inside, Zane sat slumped against the wall, cradling Lyra in his arms as she drifted in and out of consciousness. Her face was pale, her body weakened by the hive mind's influence, but she was alive and free. That fact alone felt like a miracle after everything they'd endured. Tessa and Rin exchanged quiet glances, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and relief. They had survived the impossible, but none of them spoke about what came next. The weight of what they'd done and what it meant for humanity hung heavy in the air. When the pod docked with the Eos, the rest of the crew greeted them with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Jax Corvus, still covered in grease from keeping the ship running, clapped Zane on the shoulder. You crazy bastard, he said, though there was gratitude in his voice. I didn't think you'd pull it off. Neither did I, Zane admitted, helping Lyra onto a stretcher as the medics rushed her to the infirmary. His hands trembled slightly as he watched her go, guilt and relief warring inside him. He had promised to bring her back, but at what cost? A galaxy-changed news of the Vryn spread quickly once the Eos limped back into human-controlled space. The story of their encounter became legend almost overnight, a cautionary tale of humanity's first contact with an alien species gone horribly wrong. Governments scrambled to respond, launching emergency meetings and forming task forces to prepare for potential retaliation. For the first time in history, humanity realized it wasn't alone in the galaxy, and that the universe was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Captain Elias Voss delivered a grim report to the United Earth Council, detailing the events on the planet and the devastating capabilities of the Vryn. They're not just predators, he warned. They're guardians of something ancient, something powerful. If we don't tread carefully, this won't be the last conflict. His words sent shockwaves through the council chambers. Some called for immediate military mobilization, while others argued for diplomacy and restraint. The debate raged on, but one thing was clear. Humanity's days of unchecked exploration were over. Lyra's burden, in the weeks that followed, Lyra dedicated herself to studying the data recovered from the planet. Though physically recovering, she remained haunted by memories of her partial assimilation into the hive mind. She could still feel echoes of the Vryn's collective thoughts, fragmented images of their purpose, their fears, and their warnings. They weren't attacking us because they're evil, she explained during a meeting with the senior staff. They saw us as invaders threatening something sacred. The terraforming device wasn't just a weapon. It was a tool meant to reshape worlds according to some greater plan. What kind of plan? Tessa asked, leaning forward intently. Lyra hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. Extinction. Or rebirth. I'm not sure which. But if activated, it would have rewritten the molecular structure of entire ecosystems. Billions of lives would have been erased. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. By destroying the device, they had saved countless lives, but they had also declared war on one of the deadliest species in existence. Zane's redemption, for Zane, the aftermath was a different kind of battle. Guilt gnawed at him constantly, replaying every reckless decision that had led to the disaster. Firing at the Vryn on the surface, underestimating their intelligence, dragging the team into the Hive, all of it rested squarely on his shoulders. But instead of retreating into self-pity, he channeled his regret into action. He became a vocal advocate for restraint in future explorations, warning others about the dangers of provoking unknown species. His speeches resonated deeply, especially among younger generations eager to push the boundaries of space travel. You don't know what's out there, he told a group of cadets during a training session. Every step we take beyond our borders is a risk, not just to us, but to whatever might already be living there. Respect that line, or you'll pay the price. Though he never forgave himself entirely, his efforts earned him a measure of redemption. Slowly, he began to rebuild trust with those around him, including Lyra, who understood better than anyone the burden of survival. The shadows remain. Despite their victory, the crew of the Eos couldn't shake the feeling that the Vryn weren't truly defeated. Fragments of data suggested that the Queen's death hadn't completely severed the Hive mind. Somewhere in the depths of space, the remnants of the Vryn were regenerating, adapting and preparing for another confrontation. The final scene took place aboard the Eos, now docked at a sprawling orbital station undergoing repairs. Zane stood, alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The faint hum of the ship's systems filled the silence as he sipped coffee from a chipped mug. Behind him, Tessa approached quietly, holding a tablet. We intercepted something, she said, her voice tinged with unease. A transmission originating from deep space. She handed him the tablet, and Zane read the message aloud, his voice steady despite the chill running down his spine. You have awakened us. Prepare. The screen flickered off, leaving only the cold light of distant stars reflecting in his eyes. Whatever peace humanity thought it had won was fleeting. The Vryn were still out there, and they weren't done fighting.